All right, well, let's get started. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you've got a nice lunch with you, or a cup of tea or coffee, or something stronger, depending on how you're going today. So today we're looking at the 7 motivations in the workplace and how to effectively engage staff. So before we start, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm broadcasting from today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and also extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. And no doubt, depending on where in the world you're coming from, you'll have traditional custodians from your location as well. So for those that don't know me, my name is Dr. Kerstin Oberprieler. I'm CEO and co-founder of PentaQuest. I've also got a PhD in workplace gamification, and PentaQuest specializes in using behavioral science and gamification for employee engagement. You can see there's a whole range of different clients that we work with, ranging from government, not-for-profit, multinational and private, and we've also won a range of awards for our platform and business. So let's just get cracking. We've got the chat, so as I go along, if you've got any questions or anything, please just jump out. Feel free to put your questions in there. So today we're going to cover a few things. We're going to start with what are the changes and the challenges in the workplace that we face, and particularly since 2020's completely flipped the way that we work. I'm also going to share with you some models on human motivation and psychology. We're going to spend a chunk of time talking about 7 motivational profiles that you can use in your workplace. I'll share with you briefly 3 case studies to look at how do you actually use these different motivational styles in the workplace. Give you 5 steps for implementing these, and then finish off with some takeaways. We'll also finish with some time for questions as well. So if there's any that you have throughout, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll have a bit of time afterwards. All right, ready to get started? So business has changed, no doubt, this year. A lot of things have changed. We did some research with leaders earlier in the year, and then once COVID hit. So what some of these challenges have come through direct conversations with CEOs and leaders, as well as additional research. So some of the things that we're seeing is that this year has brought a focus on the whole self, on well-being. Prior to 2020, there was a lot more separation between work and life, and this year really that's blurred, as is evident from a range of us calling in from our homes today. We've seen that we're embracing technology and digital enablement. So Zoom is now commonplace. Most of us live our lives in Zoom at the moment, and technology being used for communication and collaboration, which is excellent. There's also a more embracing from working from home. And now a lot of organizations and leaders are looking at, well, how do we transition? Now that most of the organization has worked from home, how do we transition back? And do we even want to transition back to what it was beforehand? Or is there a new normal? Is there a hybrid version that works best? There's also an increased focus on employee engagement. So how do we make sure that we stay connected in an environment where we're dispersed, working digitally, and there's a lot of things going on outside of work as well. And there is a change in the manager and staff relationship that we're hearing a lot as well. So in this, what are we seeing? So we're seeing some common mistakes that people are looking when it comes to managing the workplace, particularly when it comes to transformation, but employees as well. So when there's a diverse and spread out workforce, we're seeing that a lot of leaders are not sure how to manage that, especially if there was a lot of the management by walking around type of style. That's obviously not working in a range of different teams at the moment. We also see that there's a lack of alignment between strategy and culture. So if there's a new strategy that's being implemented, how do you actually make sure that that's part of the new culture as people are learning how to interact with it within the new way? We're also seeing a lack of consistency in performance across teams, and of course, employee engagement and turnover as well. Now, all of these things, what do they have in common? Well, it's that you're not tapping into psychology, and that's really the purpose of what I want to share with you today. So firstly, why are things engaging? What makes things engaging from a neurological perspective? Well, it comes back down to the neurotransmitters in our brain. And there's 4 key ones that play a role with how engaged we are in work, but also in everyday life. Now, you probably have heard of these before, but I'll just give you a quick summary to make sure we're all on the same page. So the first one that you'll probably have heard of is dopamine. So dopamine comes out, it's the release of happy chemicals you get in the brain when you're striving towards something. Now, it's often called the reward chemical. It's a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't just happen when you receive a reward, but actually as you work towards that goal or that reward as well. So it gets released when you're feeling pleasure. We also have endorphins, so they mask pain, so you get that, it's sometimes known as the runner's high, so when you're exercising and you feel really good afterwards, that's endorphins coming out. And its purpose is to protect you against injuries. But interestingly, it also gets released in the workplace, particularly in public speaking and things like that, which can sometimes feel a little bit, like you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger or something. We've also got serotonin. So serotonin is about social dominance. So you get a hit of serotonin when you feel respect, recognition, status, and appreciation. So serotonin actually plays a really important role in happiness as well. And people that have or are experiencing depression often have low serotonin levels. So we want serotonin, it's good for you. And then finally, we have oxytocin, the love hormone, which no doubt you've heard about as well. Oxytocin is really important for social bonding. So it's a neurotransmitter that's released during sex, after childbirth, when you look at pictures of your kids. And they've actually done a study where they looked at people looking at pictures of their kids and people looking at pictures of their dogs, and have found that the same amount of oxytocin is released. So there you go. So those neurotransmitters form the basis of how we experience engagement, how we experience pleasure and joy in our lives. When it comes to how can you set up your workplace or your own life and your own environment to do that, there's several important psychological theories that explain why this happens. So the first one is self-determination theory. And this really is becoming the keystone theory when it comes to using behavioral science in the workplace. Part of my PhD research focused on self-determination theory as well. So essentially, self-determination says there are 3 things that people seek when it comes to their work. The first is autonomy. So there's a level of choice and free will in here. So people need to be given a choice. Not too much choice, that can be overwhelming, but enough choice to feel like they have self-agency or autonomy. The second is competence. And so this is that people are feeling like they have a sense of mastery, a sense of progression, and feeling like we're growing. And the third one is relatedness. It's pretty straightforward. It's about feeling connected with other people. So self-determination says that we need to make sure we provide a level of autonomy, competence, and relatedness when it comes to our work. And interestingly, particularly when autonomy is threatened, there is a phenomenon called reactance, which is feeling that people, when you feel like your choice is taken away, it can be very, very demotivating. So yeah, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, 3 really important things. And it's a nice and simple model as well, so it's easy to remember as you apply it as well. Positive psychology is another really important one. We particularly focus on that when we work with organizations. You might have come across positive psychology in terms of well-being and things like that. So it was founded by Martin Seligman, and he's got 5 things in the acronym of PERMA that are important when it comes to well-being and thriving. So we've got positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. So wanting to make sure that we focus on those things. The other interesting one that I like to throw in is Gottman's positivity ratio. Now, Gottman did research on couples. And basically, in a very sort of freaky party trick, what he can do is he can look at you and your significant other speaking for about 5 minutes about a contentious topic, and he can tell you within like a 90-something% accuracy whether you are gonna stay together or not. So kind of spooky. So how does he do this? Well, what he does is he looks at the amount of positive versus negative statements that are made in a discussion. And the 5-to-1, meaning that you need 5 positives to weigh out 1 negative. So as humans, we feel pain a lot more than we feel pleasure. And the reason I put this one out here is because it's really interesting when we look at not just our relationships, but also our workplace, that we need to feel 5 times more positive things to outweigh 1 negative thing, which is quite a lot. Stephen says as well, there's a 5-to-1 ratio of leadership mindset. Yeah, really interesting. And actually for marketing, they actually think the ratio is 9-to-1 rather than 5-to-1 of negative. So if you've got 9, you need 9 positive reviews to outweigh 1 negative one. So really, really interesting one. So take the Gottman 5-to-1 positivity ratio with you as you go home and speak with those people close to you, but also think about it in the workplace. All right, so the 7 needs. So I've shared with you those models because they're interesting and you can use them, but also we have combined those into this model of 7 needs here. And this is what we use when we work with organizations as well. So you can see how important these things are. You can see how important it is to understand how do we create a positive mindset and a positive experience for people within the workplace. And failure to do so, is quite common because people just don't know about this science. So I'm going to talk you through each of those. Think about which one or 2 of those might be most prevalent for you or for your workplace as well. So we'll start with the first one. So the first motivational need is about the contribution to a higher purpose. This could be a sense of spirituality. It could be growth. Often contribution to community. We find a lot of not-for-profits are really high on the need for purpose. Next, we have cognitive. So this is the need to acquire information and knowledge to understand how does this puzzle fit together to make sense this is the quest for truth. So scientists are really high on this. People studying their PhD were really interested in trying to understand knowledge. Really like problem solving, puzzle solving type of need. Next, we have effective. So this is the sense of beauty, having a pleasant or aesthetic experience, romance, storytelling, and it can feel a little bit like wishy-washy, but it's actually really, really important. So, that's the sense you get when you're watching a sunrise or a beautiful piece of art or poetry or music. It's the effective driver in here. Now, we are all animals. At the end of the day, we're mammals. We have basic needs. So the need for food, water, warmth, safety, shelter. Now in the workplace, I don't recommend you really kind of tap into those too much, but it is really important to make sure that people are feeling safe, they're feeling secure, and having those basic needs met. Yeah, financial security, exactly. Job security, really, really important to have that base before you can kind of move up there. And then these 3 here come from self-determination theory. But just again, autonomy, so giving people a sense of ownership and independence over their work, giving them some freedom, some trust. Relatedness, so making sure that people are feeling connected in with each other. It can be connected in definitely with a team. It can also be connected in with the narrative or the story around the organization. So if you're looking at a focus on the customer's story, that all comes through on relatedness here. And then the final one is mastery. So again, this sense of I'm learning, I'm growing, the fact that you're giving up your time and your lunchtime to be here suggests that you have at least a sense of mastery and wanting to grow and wanting to learn, maybe a bit of curiosity as well. So this model is really important because when you're looking at your organization, we find that organizations tend to have either 1 or 2, typically 2 drivers that they're really high on. And the reason this is important is because once you've understood which 1 or 2 of these drivers are really high in your organization, you can then add mechanics into the workplace to tap into those. So, and the danger is if you get them wrong, that's when you get a mismatch. You get disengagement. You get people feeling like there's some disingenuousness happening in the workplace. So, for example, if I've got an organization that's really high on purpose, so like not-for-profits, charities, environmental activism, these sorts of things. It doesn't just have to be that, but it just as an example. If you've got an organization or a person that's really high on purpose, and you put in something like a competition or a sense of status or progression, it might work, but it's not going to be nearly as powerful as putting in things like the customer story, calculating the impact that you're making. So it's really important to understand which one or two of these are really high in your organization, and therefore how can you put in different mechanics to tap into those. I'm just going to pause here. Does anybody have any questions about this model, or should I go through any of these in more detail? If so, either unmute or let me know in the chat. Great. All right. And again, there'll be time at the end for questions. So I hope that model's been helpful for you. Feel free to take a screenshot of it if you like, or get in touch and we can share it with you afterwards as well. So now I just wanted to talk you through 3 case studies of how you can use this model and how you can use this approach in 3 very different case studies here. So the first one is a government department here. So they were looking at engagement, particularly around learning and development and professional development. So the challenges that they were facing is poor engagement with learning, low collaboration between teams. They felt like teams were working in silos and weren't kind of connecting in or taking the time to connect in with each other. Now here the motivational drivers were around a sense of mastery. So people were quite used to kind of comparing teams and kind of going, my team is higher versus your team. So they were from their sense of mastery, they were quite happy with that. So we implemented some mechanics. So we implemented things like monthly challenges, implemented a team leaderboard, things like that. And within 2 months, they had a really massive increase in engagement with their learning and development. And you can see again, their motivation was on mastery. And so we tapped into that motivation by applying those mechanics in there. We also worked with a not-for-profit here. So they're a Canberra-based not-for-profit. They had 14 teams spread out across Canberra. And this is a very high-pressure job. And especially with that being quite a hard industry, a hard sector there, their staff were not communicating and they also weren't feeling valued. And again, because they were not-for-profit, we were looking at how do you tap into the reason that they come to work. Their underlying motivation for coming to work was about helping their clients. And so we focused on things like sharing client highlights, sharing information, also sharing ideas for how staff could kind of free up some of their time or be a little more efficient in their time. And also giving recognition to each other. And you can see that within 5 months, there was this increase in these types of behaviours here. And then the final case study, just to talk you through briefly, this was an educational institution looking at their teachers. And there was, again, a lack of communication. They also felt like the rest of the workplace didn't really know what they were doing, so they really wanted to share what they were doing with others. And here, now this team was very much about relatedness. They were very much about relatedness and curiosity and the cognitive side. So looking at how to be a little bit more innovative, but definitely having competition would not have worked at all in this in this workplace. So the things that we implemented based on their motivations were things like team objectives, speaking with each other, and you can see there was some really good results there, including an increase in workplace satisfaction. The team felt more positive, improved culture, improved communication, and a whole range there. So I don't want to kind of spend too long on those, but just to show you how the different organizations with different motivations and how you need to respond to those accurately. Just got a question from David. Yes, I'm happy to share the presentation afterwards. Same for everyone else. If you would like a copy afterwards, just let us know. Happy to share it. All right. So again, I've shared with you those 7 motivations and some other models. How do you actually implement this? So again, the first thing is that you really need to understand what are the dominant motivational drivers within your organization. Every organization is different, so you can take that model. You can just do this yourself by kind of having a feel for it. You can do it a lot more, in-depth analysis through surveys and things that we typically do. But even if you just want to do it by yourself, have a look at what 1 or 2 are most prevalent in your organization. Now, you can actually do that from an organizational perspective as well as a team perspective. So you as an individual might be really high on like the effective driver, but maybe the rest of your team or organization is driven more by competence. So understanding the individual as well as the dominant motivational driver of your organization. Really, really important. That's the first thing. Once you've done that, you can then customize the mechanics based on that. So this is where your organization is now. Where do you want to get to? And then tailoring that. So I gave a few examples there, but if your organization's driven by relatedness or mastery, things like challenges work really well. Leaderboards or competition work for some organizations and teams. It definitely doesn't work for others. Maybe your organization is more driven by story and maybe those are some things that you can implement there. There's over 300 mechanics that you can apply, but again, once you've understood that, you can then effectively implement those ones that are going to be right for you and your team. You then need to implement a way to do that. It can be pen and paper. So if you've seen like the thermometer on the wall, if you're trying to raise money for charity, a sense of visual progression, that works perfectly fine. There's digital ways of doing that as well that make it a bit more automated, which is particularly useful if obviously if you're remote as well. Digital's the way to go. And then, of course, with anything that you implement, you want to get some real-time data for it, measure it, see how it's going, so that you can continually improve it. All right, so just two more things to share with you, and then we can just have a bit of an open discussion as well. So I've gone through a lot quite quickly. Hopefully what I've been able to share with you is that there's new challenges in the workplace since COVID. Some obviously have been around for a while, but COVID has now really placed a new emphasis on employee engagement and social interaction. Also, if you're looking to implement change, you need to understand human psychology at an individual level as well as a social level, and use these when you're implementing something. Otherwise, you risk not having an initiative that's high performing. So you really need to build in some of these aspects into your people management approach to make sure that you're tapping in to the underlying psychology of people. So that's it for the things that I have to share with you. If you're in Canberra, we also have another event coming up, a free breakfast seminar with a range of speakers looking at approaches specifically for government. So that's on the 24th of November, and I believe there's a few spaces left. So if you are in Canberra and interested to come along, there's plenty of networking time as well. The details are there, or you can get in touch. So that's it from me. Thank you for your attention. I'm very happy to obviously stick around. Please ask questions either on the chat or live as well. And if you want to get in touch, we're happy to share the slides or that COVID report I spoke about earlier. Happy to send that around as well.